19, verses 10 through 17 from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And lead it away to give it water. And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things being done by him. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Friends, as sort of a prelude before we go into the message today, let me just say that we are all meant to live our Christian lives with each other. The beauty of Christianity, the beauty of salvation is that we are not meant to live this precious gift by ourselves. In fact, by nature, we can see that humans as well as animals are built to live in community. We thrive the most when we are joined in communities, supportive communities where each are valued. Each person is loved. Each person is free to express their natural gifts and talents, which surely God has given to each one of you. The church is made complete by the gifts of each one of you. The things that you bring to the table enhances our worship together. And this is, in a way, grace. This is the grace that God gives to his people to share amongst each other, to worship collectively as children of the Most High God. And this is big because the church is really the ultimate community, a place where believers are formed and developed and empowered to serve the triune God. The triune God. One of my favorite theologians, Dr. Blakey, puts it so succinctly that she explains that the different parts of the church fit together. Like the church has many members who form one body, and not all members play the same role. Yet, it is a supportive group with each person strengthening each other. Because church is not just a pile of loose stones and wood. Its members are connected to Christ and should care for each other in a loving and thoughtful way. Having said all that, last Sunday, we talked about Jesus' strong language about bringing fire to the earth. You guys remember that, right? It was a challenging message which showed that the gospel not only creates community and love. The gospel not only creates community and love, but oftentimes it can and will bring divisions. The saying he used was that he did not come to bring peace, but a sword. And granted, we don't often picture Jesus. We typically, well, I typically think of peace. And that is also true. But we can hold both things together in tension because he is peace, yet he is strength. The part of the Creator who created all of us and the world. Yet this Sunday, our message dives back into the Old Testament to one of the greatest prophets, I believe, the prophet Jeremiah. God unsettled young Jeremiah. He surprised him by declaring him to be a prophet for the nation. Jeremiah's story, when you look at it in totality, is really an important example of what it means to be called. In many respects, it is similar to the Apostle Paul's experience in Acts chapter 9. But also, it is very different in many ways. Yet God chose Jeremiah even before he was born and set him apart for his purpose. Brothers and sisters, I would argue with all of you that God chose each of us before we were born. And that each of us was given a specific role to play. I am glad that so many of you found your way into the church, the institution that he developed to nurture and mature us in our calling. Remember Isaiah. When he was called, he responded famously by saying, "Here I am, Lord. Send me." Yet God speaks to Jeremiah when he was young. He tells Jeremiah, in essence, that his path for life has been already chosen. And Jeremiah has a special role and career that was selected and given to him by God. Friends, this means that he was chosen for a specific purpose. And thankfully, he did not need to look for a job. His job was already decreed. He was appointed a prophet to the nation. And Jeremiah rebuttal and remarks that he is just a young person, tells the story that he is unsure about being a prophet. Perhaps he hasn't developed the subtleties and relationships needed for this prophetic call. And insists that Jeremiah's doubts really don't matter. He tells Jeremiah, "You will go to everyone that I send you, and you will speak whatever I command you." Strong language. Because God called Jeremiah to be a prophet for a specific purpose, and he doesn't take that call back. Similarly to us. Friends, you are called. You are Christians. You don't take that back. It's here. It's there. I said that we are called because God gives us grace. He gives us the means necessary to fulfill our assignments, to love one another, to love our neighbors, our enemies, those we don't agree with, and those we do agree with. He does this because, once again, we are all called to service. And it doesn't matter if you were not called it, or it doesn't matter if you may have objected to call, because you are here today, in church today, because God's idea was for you to be here. God knew you. God knew you and had plans for you even before we recognized it. As we mentioned last week, sometimes God disrupts our complacency and transform us into a new way of thinking and living. Even in today's gospel, this Gospel of Luke, we see Jesus shows us that even the Sabbath was used to transform life and to make things better. Now, many of us know about the Sabbath, even if we don't practice it regularly. In fact, some of us grew up in a time when people observed the Sabbath, when the stores and the shops were closed. So in a way, that was a way of keeping Sabbath. Folks set aside time to not go to work and to go to church, to relax, to serve God. But in our text today, many of the religious authorities viewed the Sabbath as a bunch of rules. The religious rules were taken out of context. So, in essence, they took what God meant to be a good gift and turned it into an obligation. For example, in this healing story, the leader of the synagogue reacts to Jesus' healing on the Sabbath. On the Sabbath. And let's be frank, he reacted with righteous indignation because Jesus had the audacity to break the rules. He had the gall to heal someone on the Sabbath day. And when you think about it, friends, the rules were created to help people and to find structure and order in their lives. But more importantly, the Sabbath rules assisted maintaining God and to remind everyone of that connection. Yet, the religious leaders, clearly concerned that Jesus had broken the rules. He healed on the Sabbath day. So the response from the religious community was, are there not 6 days to heal? In other words, couldn't this lady wait until tomorrow? Now, perhaps they rationalized that she'd already waited for 18 years. What would one day more matter? Could Jesus have not waited one more day to perform this miracle? And then the text. Now, in our culture, we don't talk about shaming too much anymore. As a matter of fact, we may be labeled as someone who shame others. But in this context, I agree with Christ. Why not heal? Why not heal the woman? Is it right to do good or evil on the Sabbath? That's the underlying question. And I say this, friends, because the covenant, which was meant to help them, have become distorted by their actions. They were so burdened by the rules that they couldn't enjoy the wonderful things Jesus was doing right in front of them. The story of Jesus and his opponents is very relatable to today, especially in our divided world. I say this, friends, because we often see people who disagree with us as threats. So the question becomes, how can this text help us avoid calling and instead view them as individuals who also deserve the joy and love of Christ? And let us be candid with ourselves. Let us look at our own situations. Where might religious rules that we use be exclusive or restrictive? How do we prioritize rules over people's freedom? What changes will be required within us to increase our compassion towards others? Friends, as you ponder that, I suggest to you that it is important to remember that the Sabbath, or any day for that matter, was meant to live in love. It was a reminder to the people of Israel that the Lord has set them apart to keep the Sabbath. Because not only was it holy, it was an expression of God's grace and good gifts. The Sabbath, being the seventh day, was meant to be a complete day of rest and a day devoted to the Lord. But yet, and replaced it with strict and burdensome rules. Instead of helping people worship, their rules focus too much on following human traditions. For example, and I'm closing. Did you know that it was forbidden to wear a certain type of shoe on the Sabbath? The shoe that the Roman soldiers wore with spikes to help them for traction in battles. It was forbidden for the people to wear because it was seen as a way of threshing. I don't know, I'm not a farmer, but threshing, I guess, weeds. And when you think about it, it seems ridiculous in our modern sense that a shoe, anything, would separate us from the Lord, or just by wearing an item of clothing. Yet, it shows not only the way that we can distort something that's meant for good and create rules around it that just takes. So in closing, Jesus kept the Sabbath the best way possible by doing good. That's the ultimate Sabbath, to do good to those that are around us, to love the folks that are near, as well as those that are far. Amen.